Basic Goodness of Human Conversation Community Radio. So good morning, everybody. We were asked to talk about what our inspirations were, what our tools and resources were, and where we see the future going with relation to our subjects. And so my subject is community radio. I live in Inverness, California, out in western New England. And I work for and volunteer at a small community radio station called KWMR, Westmoreland Radio, located in Point Reyes Station. And my path to this seat here probably started, and my work with community radio started with my relationship with my mother. My mother was born in St. Louis, Missouri, and grew up there. Was very sheltered, the older child of two in a sort of middle-class family that did very well in the 1930s and 40s. And she grew up in St. Louis and was graduated from high school before she ever discovered that there was East St. Louis across the Mississippi River from Missouri in the state of Illinois, which was primarily an African-American community. And this was in the days of segregation, and she was shocked to cross the river on her way to college one day and discovered there was this whole community a few minutes from her home. And that experience sort of broke open her Midwestern, Caucasian, upper middle class upbringing, and she began to be very curious about the world. And I was her first child and her only son, and we had a very close relationship throughout her lifetime. And I learned from her a sense of curiosity about people different from myself, but also the art of talking to people, learning from people, having a conversation with someone, being curious about who they are, where they come from, what motivates them. So she was the first influence. The second influence on where I am today was actually 40 years ago this year. I began meditating. I practiced with a Zen community down in Los Altos, and sat meditation with them, and very much like what both of the other presenters have talked about is that sort of waking up quality of meditation practice, being present with oneself, but also being present with others, and being present with the environment around us. And then my third influence was my first Buddhist teacher, who I met in 1977, a Tibetan teacher who was very full of life. He would walk in a room and the room would just light up. And he loved children, and he loved animals, and he loved people. His title is Karmapa. And he would be very curious about everybody. And it was always about, how are you? It wasn't about himself. And he liked to play jokes on people, and he liked to laugh. And I just kind of lit up. I just lit up whenever I was around him. And his spirit, even though he's no longer with us, his spirit has stayed with me. And that's that quality about connecting with people, being curious about and taking pleasure and delight in people. So about 7 years ago, I hit by a car and almost died. I was a pedestrian, almost hit by a car and almost died from the experience, had an out-of-body death experience. And then shortly after that, my marriage, so I was disabled by this accident. I couldn't walk for several months. I had cognitive injuries. Shortly after that, the stock market crashed, so I lost my life savings. And then shortly after that, my marriage fell apart. And so I was disabled, overweight, very depressed, and thought, well, I'm just going to, like the elves in Lord of the Rings, I'm just going to disappear into the West. So I moved to Inverness, where I wanted to live for a very long time, and figured I would just, metaphorically crawl into the dirt and disappear. And but I had worked as an Obama organizer in the 2007-2008 campaign. I was the Semmerfeld organizer for the campaign, and really enjoyed that, working with people and kind of organizing in a way of organizing but getting out of the way so that the people who were coming to these gatherings and events could actually come forth. And it wasn't about me, it was really about the community, the group. And so I thought, well, I need to keep myself busy, so I began volunteering out in West Monroe. And one of the things that stuck was community radio. This small radio station was started after a disastrous fire in 1995 that destroyed thousands of acres of Port Reyes National Seashore, and took out, the very first thing it took out were telephone lines, both mobile phones and landlines. So people living in this rural environment, if Joanne had a house next to mine, and Kay had a house near us, I didn't know if they had gotten out. I didn't know if their houses were on fire. I didn't know if the fire was coming to my house. The small country roads were clogged with firefighting equipment and so forth. And so the community out of that fire created a community radio station so that we could be informed in the case of a disaster, but also to have some way to connect the community. And I started a radio show called The Place We Live, where I interviewed local people. I would meet people on the street who seemed very interesting, and I'd invite them to come on the radio show. Total strangers. I didn't really want to know too much about them before the radio show, so that hour together was really fresh. And so, who are you? What are you about? And that's grown into some other shows. I do music shows now. I do public topic shows. You may have heard the oyster farm debate that's going on out there, so I've waded into that whole thing and talked to people, not so much about the issue, but about who they are as human beings, a variety of other issues. So, the art of human conversation, I think, like Kay touched upon, this idea that we're using our thumbs to communicate instead of face-to-face. I think we're losing sense. I think more and more there's a pushback against technology, even as technology gets smaller. And now there's talk about putting technology into the fabric of our clothing so we can communicate just by tapping ourselves. But even as that begins to go forward, I think people at the same time are reaching back into the art of talking to each other.